I think it's 5 past, so we can start. So we're very happy to have Jialu Li from University of Arizona right now. Well, she just finished visiting CMU and is now an incoming faculty there. She did her PhD in UIUC with Mark Hasegawa Johnson. Somehow the talks all have something related to Mark. So we're very happy to have Jialu today to talk about speech processing or speech applications in children's speech. And so, yes, Jialu, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Hao, for the introduction. And I'm honored being invited to give a talk at IC as a Sigma ML seminar series. So for today's talk, I will talking about my research during my PhD. It's called Breaking Down Barriers, Advancing Interdisciplinary Speech Applications in Early Children's Development. So let's first let's first understand children's development within the first few years of life. So let's think about infants. So when they were born, they couldn't speak a word. They communicate with their caregivers or parents by babbling and crying. And as the child ages to 1 to 2 years old, their social functions and language capabilities evolve rapidly. They start to master like simple two-word phrases like thank you, as I've shown here. So once the child reaches to 3 to 5 years old, they already develop larger vocabulary and master complex sentences. And preschool age children have developed like storytelling capabilities. And developmental disorders can emerge at each stage. And now let's take a closer look at each stage to uncover what might happen. So let's look at the infants. So for infants, like daily interactions with family members that are repeated and reinforced over time are critical to a children's emotional well-being. Here I show two types of patterns of parent-infant interactions, which including the coordinated interactions and uncoordinated interactions. The blue bar here shows the infant vocalization and orange bar here shows the parent vocalizations. So for coordinated interactions, the parent and infant just taking turns to vocalize over each other. And for uncoordinated interactions, this can include like some no response. For example, this can be either party. The child, the infant initiates the vocalization and there's no response after a certain period for the parent vocalizations, or the co-vocalization or interruptions, the parents and child taking vocalizations interrupt or co-collapse over each other. And from previous psychology studies, establishing coordinated interactions in early childhood is beneficial for infant psychological development. In contrast, if the repeated and reinforced uncoordinated interactions could contribute to mental health problems in the long run. And as I showed that the benefits of turn-taking interactions or the coordinated interactions led to better infant stress recovery at 6 and 9 months old. And this is done by my colleague in the psychological lab. And these mutually responsive behaviors help increase shared positive interactions and emotion regulations. And here, let's look at 1 to 2 years old toddlers. So at this stage, children start developing their social functions and language capability, and early signs of autism may occur. And here I show some. This can include like deficient social and communication skills, avoidance of eye contact, repetitive patterns of behaviors, and speech and language delays. And autism screening and diagnosis are mainly composed of two parts, like including parent reports and professional diagnosis. So parents interact with their children every day, so their observations are valid and essential for screening and diagnosis. And professional screening just involves like some observations and ratings of clinician-child interactions. So during screening, the clinicians briefly observes the children's behaviors. So if the clinician believes the child is at risk of autism, then formal assessments is needed. So as the child grows to 3 to 5 years old, so developmental language disorders may occur. So as I show here, DLD is a neurodevelopmental disorder that interferes with learning, understanding, and using languages. And common DLD symptoms that's listed here, including like some problems with grammars, limited vocabulary, leaving sounds out of words, and etc. And DLD is prevalent, affecting 1 in 14 children in kindergarten. And DLD manifests in early childhood and persists into adulthood. The screening of DLD and diagnosis also contains like parent reports and professional diagnosis. And the professional assessment includes just aims to elicit children's speech and responses. And speech and language pathologists elicit children's speech by giving a prompt or asking the children to repeat given sentences. And the children's speech is transcribed for further analysis, as I show here, and I have like some assessment tests. So developmental disorders can occur at different stages of children's development, and it's very essential to early identify them and provide timely interventions. And the benefits of early interventions include, I'm here listing here, like enhanced social skills, improved academic performance, better economic outcome, increased independence, and improved family functioning. However, challenges do exist in like screening and diagnosis, as you showed us, as shown by the recent news. One major challenge is that like the excessive long waiting time for diagnosis due to limited available professional services. And these long waiting times can significantly delay the early identification process. So in my research goals, I aim to develop interdisciplinary speech applications using machine learning algorithms for early identification of developmental disorders in children. And this is achieved by capturing critical child-adult interactions under different social contexts. Samples like here I show two social contexts, including the family audio analysis. This is aimed to detecting if turn-taking vocalizations between the parents and infants at home has been established. As I shown in previous slides, this is critical for infants' positive psychological development. Or we can develop models for autism screening to detect whether joint attention between clinician and child at clinicians at clinics for autism screening, because detecting joint attention is a key factor that clinicians consider relevant for screening outcomes. So before I dive into how I develop the models for my research goals, I want to emphasize the challenges in building interdisciplinary speech applications. As just like the chit-chat we had before my talk begins, there's seriously data sparsity in interdisciplinary speech applications. So first, the annotation is very time-consuming, labor-intensive. When we're annotating like 10 minutes family audio, this could require 2 to 3 hours of labor. And annotating 5 minutes video of clinician-child interactions with 3 modalities, such as gaze, gesture, and speech, this requires 5 hours of labors. So a very natural question to ask is, how much label data is required for a speech processing model to perform well? And the next question is asked is, how can we enhance the model performance given the limited amount of label data? And for the first questions, if we go back to how the speech processing model has been built, here is a very famous speech recognition benchmark for Libre speech. Probably everyone who works on speech knows what Libre speech is. It's a corpus of 906 hours of transcribed adult speech from audiobook readings. I didn't update the benchmark here. Probably it's getting even more better. So as of the year, if we are using supervised learning, just using label data sets, the speech community can achieve about like 3% or 4% on the test set using all kinds of machine learning models. So this can be considered as a solved problems. So, but in reality, maybe we can estimate that we need 1,000 hours of labeled data set to build interdisciplinary speech applications, but this is impractical to just gather 1,000 hours. It will just take years of the building the data, and we have to make sure it's high quality and all these challenges. So to elevate the labeled data requirements, the speech community or all the community have established self-supervised learning. So basically there's 3 stages. First, we use unsupervised pre-training that's using large-scale unlabeled data sets, followed by some supervised fine-tuning using a limited amount of labeled data. Then we can test it on the limited amount of labeled data sets. So in this way, the large model learns the fundamental wave structures based on unsupervised pre-training, and this gives much better results on the supervised fine-tuning on multiple downstream tasks. So for today's talk, I will talk about the two projects, as I mentioned previously, to capturing critical child-adult interactions under different social contexts using self-supervised learning models. Then I will conclude my talk by briefly mentioning my future visions. So first, without further ado, so let's look at the first project of how I'm monitoring infant psychological development using Wave2Vec2 models. So for this project, the motivation briefly is, according to CDC estimate, so 1 in 6 children aged to 2 to 8 years old has a mental, behavioral, and developmental disorders. However, evaluation method of this MBDD on the 1-year-old is very limited. And early identification of patterns of parent-infant interactions may correlate with later mental health problems among the children. So my research goals is to develop robust speech processing models to automatically analyze parent-infant interactions in infants' home environments. I specifically focus on two tasks, including the speaker diarization, identifying who spoke when, and vocalization classifications, identifying the type of vocalization given the speakers. So for speaker diarization, we're identifying family members when they're speaking at what time. And for vocalization classifications, like for example, for infants, if the infant is crying, we're labeling as crying, not fussing or babbling. So to collect family audios, our group developed a multimodal infant wearable device that can simultaneously record the audio, movement, and heart rate variability of the child. So on the right-hand side, I'm showing the pictures that specifically designed shared for the infants. So where the little bits it's placed in front of the children's chest. An infant and child wears it during the day, and the device records the data. And after 2 or 3 days, the device is sent back to the lab for post-processing and further research. So if our lab conducts multimodal research, including these three modalities, but my work specifically focusing on the audio modules, and feel free to check out if you're interested in the multimodal research even a little bit more. So for data collections, as I mentioned, unlabeled data sets, we have the child wears the little bits or Lena during the day for 2 or 3 days. And we have this labeled data sets that's only a few of 10 minutes most vocalized segments that can be annotated for each family because we're shorting labors and annotating is very time consuming and very expensive. And Lena is just another infant wearable audio only recording device with its own speaker diarization functions built in, and we're using it for recording the audio only. So we have, what exactly are we annotated? Here is the annotations. So for speakers, we're looking at 4 speakers, including the target infants, adult female, usually the mother, adult male, a father, another child siblings, if any presents in the family recordings, and infant vocalizations, including crying, fasting, or babbling, and parent vocalizations, including like child-directed speech, adult-directed speech, laughing, and singing. Child-directed speech is also called mother-ease. This is like usually higher, it contains like higher pitch tone when the parents are interacting with the infants. And this has shown that speaking child-directed speech is actually preferred by the infants, and which is very beneficial for infants' development or language acquisitions. And adult-directed speech, just basically adult talking to another adult in a regular tone. And on the right-hand side, I'm showing a Pratt window of sampled labeled segments from the annotators. So here is the data distributions when I first conduct my research at year of 2023. Now we have more data sets, but we'd like to appreciate all this our collaborators from 3 children's hospitals and universities to help us recruit families to participate in our studies. So for the label data sets, we have little bits and Lena recordings, and the Lena recordings have the age range under 24 months old, but basically all other data sets are recorded under 14 months old, and we have about like 22 families with 10.6 hours using little bits recordings. And we are able to invite the families to conduct some lab visits at university, and we gather like some semi-structured activities between the parents, infants, and lab, and we further gather like more data set about 11 hours. And this labeled data set was collected over a few semesters, and it's very hard to get. But for unlabeled data set, it's very easy. We just give for the children who are under 5 years old, we gather from about 223 families from Little Bits and Lena recordings. And for the Little Bits, we have 1,100 hours of unlabeled recordings. And for Lena data set, we have even more for 3,200 hours of total recordings from children under 5 years old. So as I mentioned previously, I'm using self-supervised learning for family audio analysis. So the first model I'm using is the Wave2Vec2 originally released by Meta AI Research. So it follows 3 stages. It uses 906 hours of unlabeled adult speech, followed by 10 minutes labeled adult speech. And they are testing using automatic speech recognitions, and it shows superior performance even using 10 minutes labeled adult speech can be comparable to using 100 hours of labeled speech for supervised learning. So self-supervised learning really works well. So in our pipeline stats, For the pre-training, we're using unlabeled family audios followed by labeled family audios, and we are performing 3 family audio analysis tasks. This including the speaker diarizations, infant vocalization classifications, and parent vocalization classifications, as I described previously of what kind of labels we're doing. And for speaker diarizations, we're just adding a silence classes to distinguish whether the current frame is actually silenced or there's one family speakers is active. So here shows the experimental setup for very briefly the data processing for the unlabeled data sets. We're using VAD, the voice activity detector, to filter out those silent segments because we only want the active regions for the family's speakings. And we segment the voiced audio into 10 seconds chunk each. And data pre-processing for the labeled data sets, we are calculating 2 seconds intervals each for every 0.2 seconds, and the label is determined from the majority of vocalization labels in centered 1 second. And we exclude overlap speech regions at the first step. And we follow the leave one family out data partitions. We have the training, development, and testing all from different families. So when the training, the testing set doesn't see the previously seen the families. That's the important, some of the important experimental setup. And the model is actually very easy. We just feed into the little bits waveform. We have 12 transformer layers, and we do some main pooling for aggregation. And for each task, we use the weighted average to aggregate 12 layers of 12 layer representations from all these transformer layers, and we feed into a feed-forward network, and we compute speaker diarization as a classification task. And the setup is very easy, and it has been shown on, this is very similar for what has been shown for emotion recognition or superb benchmark. The architecture is just simple and works effectively. So first experiments, I'm comparing to unsupervised pre-training comparisons. So basically we compare, we use unsupervised pre-training for different purposes, and we fine-tuning only on the labeled in little bits training data, and we're testing on labeled little bits training data because we want to improve the little bits performance. And unsupervised pre-training corpus, including the Libre speech, a little bits 1,000 hours, 1,100 hours, or the little bits plus Lina, in total it's 4,300 hours of data sets. And so for Libre speech, if you see the 2 lines, we are using F1 scores to evaluating all these classification tasks. And you see that compared the first row and the second row, the pre-training corpus, if you're using adult speech, it's significantly suboptimal than using the in-domain little bits data sets, which has the infant-centric audio and has everything we need. And we have a significant jump of the performance using 1,100 hours recordings. Even if we add an additional, like the third row compared to the second row, we add another 3,022 hours of 200 hours of recordings from Linus. We even get even more performance improve, about like another 2% jump for the F1 scores. So the experience we show that the pre-training using in-domain data set will reduce the domain mismatch between the training and testing sets. And then we did some improvements during the fine-tuning. We did like some data augmentations and corruptions for enhancing the fine-tuning. So the data augmentation, we basically add those additional label data from additional like a Lina and the lab visit recordings. And we use like some data corruptions like spec-aug, random audio chunks dropping or speed perturbations, and also the environmental speech corruption like reverberation, additive noise, and reverberation plus noise. And additive noise can come from like a Moonsound data set. This can include a variety of noises, or chime home data set that's just like have domestic noises that are recorded from home and kitchens. And we compare these 2 types of noises to see if can even improve more slightly. And here is the results. That the first one is the baseline I copied from my previous experience that I used 4,300 hours of little bits and Lina home recordings, followed by supervised fine-tuning with like data augmentations. And we see that if we apply the data augmentations on the speaker diarization only, you'll get a large jump from the baseline results. And we also see some slight improvements for vocalization classifications. And as the data augmentation doesn't really improve too much in terms of the semantic or emotions from the children's or parents. But overall, we find that data augmentation is very helpful for speaker diarization performance, and it shows much more robust, even from different sources, noise to help the model learn better how to distinguish between family members. And this concludes my first experiment using wave-to-vec to improve the family audio analysis. I want to stop here, see if anyone has some questions before I move on to my recent work on even tackling on this model, tackling other models.
Any quick questions? Yes, feel free to unmute yourself and just ask.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, could you elaborate on the corruption strategies that you used?
So the spec augmentation just randomly, like random audio chunks dropping or speed perturbation. We have environmental speech corruption, just reverberation or plus noise, or reverberation, combine the reverberation and the noise. And Muson data set was just the one that has a variety of noises coming from the environments, or like outdoors and indoors environments noises. And Chaimpong data set was only collected from like domestic, like from homes or from kitchens. And we applied the noise because we have 3 tiers. We applied the data augmentation specifically on the speaker diarization tiers only. As we find out, if we apply the data augmentation on the vocalization or vocalization classification, it gives me like downgraded performance. And I think probably the noise is more robust to help the model to learn who's actually speaking, but it's very hard for the model to tell the type of vocalization is because it's more involved into semantics. I think it's semantics or emotion side. I hope that makes sense. Is that like what you want to know?
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. Maybe I missed it, but when you trained for these classification tasks, were they in a multitask setting or were they trained separately?
It's like multitasking because we have 3
Mm,
tasks. So
Okay, yeah, thank you.
yeah, I can move forward. And if you have more questions, we can discuss at the end of the talk. So the second work is we are exploring other models. The member models recently came out, and this project was led by my colleague Shiling Fan also from the Marx lab. So basically, I'm here showing some spectrogram-based model. The wave-to-vec model was based on the raw wave audios. And the audio spectrum, like AST, I'm showing here, has been very famous. It shows strong performance on audio detection tasks by pre-training it on large amount of audio set and audio clips. So AST basically adapts to the vision transformer architecture and accepts the log-mel spectrograms and treats them like an image, and further divides it into patches and processing them with self-attention mechanisms that look at the transformer encoders. And the pre-training stages has this classification head and reconstruction head. And the classification head is basically classify which patch is distinguish between the positive and negative pairs between the patches. And the reconstruction head is basically reconstruct the masked patches during the linear projections. And the AST learns to capture the patterns and the dependencies across both time and frequency domains, because we're using the input spectrum grant as the to represent to capture both like time and frequency representations. And from the right-hand side, I'm showing the recent work on the transformer on the member. So the transformer relies on the self-attention to capture dependencies, and member is a state space model that uses a structured like state space time that uses like linear time computation while also maintaining the capability to model long range dependencies. And Samba, like on the right-hand side, shows that it both like use self-supervised learning first with bi-directional member, like encoded here, the forward and backward state space models, and it has shown very competitive benchmark on audio event detection tasks. And I'm not going to the details of like how member encoder works, but I think it has gained some famous attentions on how to reduce the computation time from transformer and still gets a good performance, especially on the audio member side. But none of those models have been tested on the infant-centric audio, like I show, like the data sets I had used in our lab. So the motivation behind what we want to do is we do a band split Samba models. So the spectrograms, here I show like two types, the Samba model or AST model, how they use the traditional patch sequence. When they divided this 2D spectrogram and use it for a traditional patch sequence, they just line up sequentially and from two bands. It doesn't consider the band informations. But in our proposed model, we split the bands based on the frequency axis, because in temporal axis is actually harder to model than the frequency axis, as the temporal axis involves like complex, non-stationary or long-range dependencies, and audio signals change dynamically over time, and important patterns like speech, phoneme, sound events can span multiple timescales or very short, or they can be very short, just like some short bursts from the infants crying. This will require the model to capture in both short-term and long-term contexts. But in contrast, the frequency patterns is more localized or stable, which has less dependencies by the structures. And here we propose the structure is that for the small class data sets like little bits recordings, we can make this seek-to-seek Samba models more band invariant and let frequency modeling happen in the band-specific layers. So we are dividing the frequency axis into different subbands, because the subband spectrograms can be informative if wide enough frequency subbands like 2 to 3 kilohertz can contain reasonable information for vocalization classifications, especially for like some infant crying or infant screeching. The pitch frequency can reach to like 1,000 hertz, but that's never the thing for a human. So even we consider the bands divided based on its frequency axis, you can still has a very a lot of information for the model to learn. So just intuitively for what we propose for the band split Samba architectures, we have, if we compare to the traditional the Samba or AST, how it performs to produce these traditional patch sequences, we have more and shorter sequences for pre-training. And during the reconstruction objective, it could be harder during the pre-training for learning the robust representations with less information in the subbands. And it could have like weaker crossband modeling in band split settings. But the first two bullet points seems to give more benefits during pre-training to reduce some data requirements. Also did more data augmentations in terms of the variance of information that gives to the models. So the pre-training of band split Sambas, I'm showing the overall procedures here. So first, we split the spectrograms into overlapping subbands, and we applied band-specific projections on each band. So each band was divided according to the frequency axis. And during the combining the features from the bands for each band, we're given a projected band features, and we prepend some band-specific tokens like for each band, and we have some shared positional embeddings for P0 to PT, and we mask out certain ratios of patches, and we sum up the input sequences for basically the band-specific tokens and projected band features along with the positional encoders. And this will give all the final information that will pass to member, seek-to-seek member encoders. And during pre-training, we basically follow the same training projective AST. We have the reconstruction loss and the discriminated loss. The reconstructions, basically, we are measuring using mean squared errors. And for the classifications, we're using like info NC loss that only samples negative pairs from the same band instead of like the whole patch sequences. This is the band split Samba models we're exploring. And for the fine-tuning stages, we're adding these frame-wise feature extractors, and those are actually computing like the energies. The motivation behind those is that in the little bits recordings, we have the distance to adults or the resulting voice volume is very critical to distinguish the adult-directed or child-directed speech. To the child-directed speech, because if the adult talking to the infants in a closed distance, the energy can be larger. And if the adult's talking to another adult in the background, the energy can be looser. The energy can be like lower. So we extract like a frame-wise energy here, and we put it into linear projections so we can condition the final classification on the frame-wise energies. And here, while we aggregate the input features from the pre-training stage, like the master tokens, and we do a classification on the final on the cross using cross entropy loss. So this the fine-tuning model actually conditions both on the spectrogram-based model as well as the extracted energy frames. So here, this is the fine-tuning stage of band split sandbox. And some experimental setup is very similar to what we had previously. And we are experimenting with a small amount of 1,100 hours of little bits recordings. And we segment the voice audio into 10 seconds chunk. And for label data sets, we are following the configuration during pre-training. We use 10 seconds interval for every 0.2 seconds. And the labels is determined by the majority vocalization centered at 0.1 seconds. And this time we merge majority labels into one 10 class tier for final classifications. So instead of separating the speakers and the vocalization types, we're experimenting with just one with all this type of with all types of important vocalizations instead of comparing to like multitask learning. And we're also following the Leave1 family out partitions with more data sets and more high quality annotations. And in our band split sample settings, we're using 3 bands, and we max out tokens of 75%. And the audio sampling rate is about 16,000 hertz. So according to the Nyquist sampling rate, the maximum frequency will be 8,000, and each band would take about 2,600 kilohertz kilohertz to learn during the pre-training and also the fine-tuning. During the fine-tuning, we'll aggregate all this information, all the call information from the frequency bands. And for the results here, I'm quickly showing that we're comparing from the original Samba models but we're seeing like a suboptimal performance. The second row actually is the original configuration from the self-supervised Samba models. And because you see 16 by 16 patches, but in this way, it actually lacks the temporal resolutions. So we're experimenting even more to divide the patches into more smaller scale, like a more refined temporal scales, about 64 times 4 for the time times frequency. And we see that the regular patch, the rectangular patch is better than a square patch in the Samba models. And for the last, and we're applying we're applying the band split samples under the same settings of the patch 64 by 4 and stride of 32 by 4, that the accuracy and F1 scores even improved more. And we see that we proposed model that the band split Samba has outperformed the Samba model, the original self-supervised Samba model that's pre-trained using the audio set. And compared to the wave-to-vec little bits I developed in my previous studies, and the wave-to-vec still represents a very strong baseline that has higher accuracy, very high accuracy and F1 scores. And the band split Samba model shows outperformance of wave-to-vec model by very small margins, but it overall achieves an optimal performance. So those are a very recent work that we are tackling using very famous, a very like a popular audio member model to see how it works in our infant-centric audios. So to conclude this project, we learned that the self-supervised learning with home recordings really enhances family audio analysis tasks. But in the future, it will be critical to refine existing algorithms and test them across a broad range of families in diverse audio environments. And I hope I was clear about what I present here. But if not, I can also take some questions if there's any quick one, just to understand the model better, or you have other questions.
Any quick question? I guess not. So we can proceed.
Okay, yeah. So this then I will switch my focus on talking about how I use the wave-to-vec2 model development for autism screening. This is switching for different social context. So I use the rapid ABC protocol for autism screening, which contains 3 to 5 minutes clinician-child semi-structured assessments. And this protocol consists of 5 phases, including greetings, ball plays, reading book, putting book on the heads, and smiling and tickling. So the clinician just observe how the child behaves during this semi-structured assessment to see if there is a joint attention established between the clinicians and the child. So the research goal remains the same as the previous projects that I want to develop robust speech processing models to automatically analyze clinician-child interactions. This includes the speakerization and vocalization classifications. And the vocalization classification compared with the infants, toddlers can start speaking simple word phrases, and this makes the task even more difficult. So the motivation behind this work is that it can use to automatically generate visualizations for screening results. Here I show a sample plexi-line visualizations that consisting of like gaze, speech, and gesture modalities from the rapid ABC protocols. And labels for each modalities are shown along the time axis and reflect the children and clinician interactions among these 5 phases. And with these visualizations results, it actually can help the clinicians to capture events of interest and communicate better with parents, because some of the symptoms, like autism symptoms, are very clear, very obvious to the clinicians, but it's not obvious to the parents. And with the visualizations, the parents can easily understand what can go wrong with the children. And also with the visualization, it's helpful to educate new clinicians to see which interactions is actually critical when observed to how the children behave. So for these annotations, we have only 2 speakers of the child and adult clinicians. For the child vocalizations, we have 4 classes, including the verbalization actually containing word phrases, like actually human knows the lexicon, what the lexicon meaning is, and some non-sense, non-lexical vocalizations, basically just ba, something like those that doesn't make any sense, and or laughter and crying. And adult vocalizations just containing speech and vocalizations or the laughter. Because the clinicians have to entertain with the child all the time, and you have to speak a lot. You have to entertain and laughing a lot about the kids. So the evaluation metric, I'm using diarization error rates. The lower the error rates, the better the performance is. And the diarization error rates has 3 parts of false alarm, misdetection, and speaker confusion rate error divided by the total reference speaker time, as this is like gold standard of speakerization performance. And vocalization classification, I'm still using the unweighted F1 scores. So the data formats, so 2 audio streams from 1 lapel mic is placed in front of each speaker's chest. And we have very limited amount of data partitions. We have 51 sessions conducted by 4 clinicians and 43 children, and 8 children were assessed twice. And we performed 3-fold cross-validation by leaving 1 child out to make sure that the experiments are valid and not seeing the child during the training. And another data set I'm using is called the Bible core data set. This contains 11,000 short audio clips from 22 healthy children that's aged 2 to 36 months old without speech delay collected by Alina. And this is useful for assessing children's speech maturity for potential speech and language delay detections. And it has been used in 2019 interspeech paralinguistic challenges with evaluation metric of unweighted average recall. And the categories of the same has the canonical babbling, non-canonical babbling, crying, and laughing and junk. So canonical babbling, just like the speech-like vocalizations that has a consonant to vowel transition, and non-canonical babbling has non-lexical vocalizations without a consonant to vowel transitions. So if the child doesn't babble a lot with non-canonical babbling, it may indicate it has less speech maturity than the child has more canonical babbling. So the baseline models here, I can use for the rapid ABC data sets. I'm still using the WaveMag model I developed for my Little Bits project that has pre-training on this 4,300 hour home recordings, followed by the rapid ABC training data. And I can just adapt, since we have like 2 audio streams, I can just combine this multiple channel audio and perform vocalization classification tasks. But this baseline model works great. It doesn't solve one question, is that how can we better distinguish the verbalization and vocalization of the toddlers? And this is also critical to assess their speech maturity. So the solution is that I want to enhance the children's audio analysis with external phone recognizers. So I use external children's wave files and build a phone recognizer as the first step. This has shown like sample phonetic transcripts. And if you ask me why did I not build a speech recognition system for toddlers, the reason is that the data is really sparse, and the toddlers has very high variability of pronunciation and very low speech intelligibility. And so we extract the so once we have these phone recognizers, we can extract the children's phonetics from the phone recognizer to enhance the audio analysis task. So we can somehow extract the children's phonetics from the phone recognizer and feed back to the original way-to-mag model and perform the vocalization classification task. So the first step, how did I build these phone recognizers? I have 3 data sets. Basically, I use the Libre speech that's transcribed adult speech by reading the audiobooks, and my science tutor data set that contains about 1,300 children in 3rd and 5th grades of their conversational speech with a virtual tutor, and the Providence corpus, that's the longitude study of 6 children, like 1 to 4 years old, 3 boys and 3 girls interacting with their mothers at home. And the Providence corpus using the SAMPA phonetic symbols to annotate children's vocalizations, and because the Providence corpus was using the phonetic labels, so I've converted them. I'll convert all 3 data sets into the IPA formats, and I perform the self-supervised learning for the children's phone recognizers. And I filter out those long utterances from my science to the Libre speech because usually the young children doesn't produce a lot of long utterances. It can also I only produce like a very short, just like show some simple words. And I use 3-level fine-tuning with CTC loss that gradually decrease the phonetic variations from adults to young children. So first we have this pre-trained wave-to-back base model and fine-tuning using Libre speech with 100 hours of adults. Then fine-tuning again using the mind science tutor that's 8 to 10 years old children, and fine-tuning again on the children with 1 to 4 years old. So just to let the model learn the age difference. And I got the results from the children's phone recognizers. We used the phone error rates to evaluate the children's phone performance. And we see that the first observation, we see that each model actually performs the best on its own data sets and own age range. And this doesn't have much more domain difference. But if you look at the Providence corpus, without 3-level fine-tuning, it just doesn't converge for those 2 data sets that are pre-trained on wave-to-back Libre speech or mind science tutor, the phone error is greater than 100%. But if you do the 3-level fine-tuning, it actually reaches to 60% phone error rates. Even though it's still bad, but it has the model starts recognizing some of very young children's phoneme. I think I'm a little bit short on time, so I will skip the analysis of the children's phone recognizers. I just see how it has been used for analyzing the children's audio analysis. So once the phone recognized the toddler speech, I did 2 methods for incorporating the children's phonetics. So I can edit just using like extract embeddings from the children's wave files, like the rapid ABC children, what it says, and we have the phonetic embeddings extracted from the wave-to-back phone recognizer, since it has recognized some of the toddlers' phonemes. Or I can add the output phone recognition task. Say, if the child saying playing the book and sets book, and the wave-to-back phone recognizer learns to transcribe the children's wave file to book, and the original model learns to recognize the child what the child actually speeches, and it will just distinguishing whether it's actually just like a vowel, like non-lexical vocalization versus verbalizations. So the results here shows using wave-to-back Providence corpus with 1 to 4 years old. And we see that the multi-channel baseline, even though we're adding the input features or adding as an auxiliary task using the wave-to-back Providence corpus, we improve the children's vocalization classification task. But for the output task, it has the best diarization area, but just slight improvements, very slight improvements. But either way, it shows that our model actually works, and adding this phoneme recognition task to the original model helps improve distinguish between the toddlers' vocalizations versus verbalizations. And we kind of experimented with different, whether the mind science tutor wave-to-wake phone recognizer actually works well in our experiments. So if you look at the mind science tutor, we adding these additional features, we still outperform the multi-channel baseline in terms of the children's vocalization classifications. But if we compare with the wave-to-wake providence corpus, the wave-to-wake providence model still outperforms the mind science tutor that's like 8 to 10 years old, the children's model. That just means that age still matters. The model learns the difference between very young age children and older age, like older children's phonetics, which I find interesting. And here it shows like some results of Babel core. That's just like one channel that distinguishing the speech maturity, very similar structure of a rapid ABC. For the model, I basically just ignore the adult vocalization classification tiers. And we see that comparing to the previous SOTA baselines, even though we're just fine-tuning the wave-to-wake models, wave-to-wake little-base models, we already get like competitive performance. But if we add like additional output tasks of providence corpus, we have much more higher unweighted average recall and F1 scores in the Babel core datasets that used in the 2019 interspeech challenges. And just very briefly, that my colleagues, also the speech community takes an extension of the Babel core datasets that has extended to speech maturity dataset that contains about even larger 240,000 KR short audio clips. That's just 500 milliseconds each from 122 children exposed to 25 languages in all sorts of countries. And each audio clip was annotated by 3 public citizens. And there's like unclean division. The audio clips can be difficult or noisy to classify vocalization types, or they have like clean version that only contains a subset of speech maturity sets that has a strong agreement among 3 annotators per clip. And this is extension of speech of the Babel core data sets. And they are applying my models and seeing that the fine-tuning our models with different wave-to-wake using the clean version of training data and tested on uncleaned and uncleaned versions of speech maturity data sets. And it shows that the fine-tuning the wave-to-wake base, the first row is released by Facebook AI. It has a competitive baseline, but fine-tuning the ones that pre-trained on little bits recordings even shows more improvements. And if I add an output task, then adding even the phony recognition models, this just gives the best results, even on this like uncleaned versions that has a lot of noise and a lot of noise and unclassified vocalization types. So the key takeaways, very briefly, for the project is that self-supervised learning-based phone recognizers can improve the recognition of young children's phonemes by learning from the phonetics of older children, and it also enhances the performance of children's vocalization classifications, and is helpful for the automatic assessments of children's speech maturity. And those reliable speech labels are beneficial for generating visualizations for early identification of autism patterns. And in the future, building machine learning models to further analyze different modalities will enhance the overall screening process with AI. I talked through the second project was, and now I will just very briefly to conclude the future talk. So we have the parent-infant interactions at home and teacher and the clinician interactions at clinics, and we can use all these kind of social contexts, also including like teacher-child interactions at school, and we can using like AI screening techniques based on the speech, and then we can generate those automatic speech analysis and provide reports for clinicians, parents for the early identification of developmental issues, and use it for a more reliable analysis for children, including like autism, developmental language disorder, and speech and language delays. And here we can divide the automatic assessment of speech and language development based on the milestones. So I can skip this since I'm short on time. And we can provide multilingual support in the future, as multilingual is also important for analyzing the speech within the speech community. And by the end of the talk, I want to acknowledge the support and the mentorship I received from my supervisors and my collaborators, and I'm grateful for all the grants and fundings to help me build the project. And thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions now. I'm not sure if I'm a little bit over time.
No, you're fine. You're actually fine on time. Thank you so much for the great talk.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Just feel free to unmute. I actually have a couple.
Okay.
Well, I'll let people think about their questions while I ask. So in the first and the second part of the talk, um, you mentioned that you actually pre-trained the wave to vec yourself. Is that right?
Yeah.
And is it more like continual pre-training of the pre-trained models?
No, it's pre-training from scratch.
Oh, okay. And on 4,000 hours, is that right?
Yes.
Am I getting what?
Yes.
So how long does it take to do that?
Um, right now it's more easier now with A100. Like the member model trains on 3 days to consume 1,100 hours of recordings. By the time of 2023, I'm using H100 and it's like a cluster-based model, and I have to submit a job. It took me about like 2 months to finish, including the waiting time, the checkpoints. That's like the first experience that from coming. I think the very last of experience coming from academia have a lot of resources to do pre-training. It's pretty
Wow.
risky, actually.
Okay, yes. Well, very courageous and well done. I mean, I've never seen any scale like that in academia. Um, okay. I don't know if other people have questions. I can keep asking.
I apologize. I probably went through the second part a little bit quicker, but I think I touch up the things I want to mention.
Right. So speaking of the later part, um, it's kind of interesting that you do this curriculum training, right? So you go from the adults and then fine tune it, and then you try to lower the ages. Have you tried to just mix them together, like doing a union and then just randomize everything? And would that even work?
Yeah, I was short on time, so I didn't touch up the analysis. So I actually performed like some canonical correlation analysis just to see how the model actually performs. And this like CCA analysis for children's phone recognizers. So I use CCA to measure the similarity between like 12 wave to back transformer layer representations and children's phonemes. To see how similar of the input audio and output the phonetic transcript is. Here it shows the CCA scores of fine-tuned different wave-to-back models. So the blue line is the Libre speech, and the orange line is Einstein's tutor, and the gray line was the Providence corpus. So if you see the first two models, the Libre speech and mind sense are actually pretty similar. If you fine tuning on the mind science tutor, it actually learns to close the gap between the phonetic similarities. This basically means the Libre speech and mind science tutor have very similar phonetics, but it never recognized the Providence corpus, the very young children, like aged 1 to 4 years old. But if you do the third row, it start learning the Providence corpus, start getting close to the mind science tutor, but still it's not 100, and it start forgetting about like how adult speaks if you look at the layer from 1 to 12 of wave to X. So I suspect that mixing all of them probably wouldn't work because the young children just have completely different distributions than the older children's and the adults. I hope that makes sense. I think that's also my suggestions. And also thinking, I also trying to do speech like phoneme recognition, just still based on the pre-training the pre-training little bit audio, and it doesn't also does still diverges. It's really recognizing young children, even though it's pre-trained on a young children's voice. I think that's probably another interesting research direction as well.
Right, right. I mean, this is one of those rare examples where, dumping everything together is not going to give you the result that you want.
Yes.
Yeah, because the common wisdom is to dump everything together. Okay, that's very interesting. Um, any more questions? Um, can I ask maybe one more?
Yes, yes, sure.
So in your member model, it's actually interesting that you picked this model because I haven't seen a whole lot of research on using this model at all, or even AST. I mean, ASD is like super popular in environmental sound classification and so on. But then somehow it just doesn't work that well on speech. Um,
Right, right,
and you kind of you kind of design this new kind of bands for splitting the patches, right?
right.
And you decided to go for linear frequency. So would it be better to actually use male or something like more, compressed frequencies?
That's an yeah, that's an interesting research directions. This project was led by my colleague. I think we're trying to explore the MAMA model because it starts showing competitive performance on different like audio events. And our group also, I feel like the infant vocalization, also male, female, is like also like sort of event detections. Um, but what do you suggest here for like a log scale? Are you talking about like log scale of frequency?
Yeah. Something like male. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would probably works if probably well you will have like a harder time to tell between female and male if we use male feature. It will probably easier to tell the infants, but the model is really pretty good at recognizing infants' voice because infants are the one that has the largest energy because the infant wears the recorder and the infant's voice is very unique. It has a very high pitch, very high pitch sounds than the adults. I think that might works well for the infant, even better for the infants, but it could be harder for the adults because adults
Yeah.
it's really hard task in our setting.
Yeah. I mean, I can also think of, reasons for and against that. As you said, infants, their vocalization is in a very different pitch range. So,
Right, right.
yeah. All right. Um, do we have even more questions from the audience? No? Um,
If you have more questions, you can ask me offline, and I'm happy to chat more. I'm sorry if I go over the talk a little bit quicker for
no,
the
no,
sec.
no. Yeah. And if not, I'll thank the speakers again. Thank you so much. Oh,
Hello.
yeah, hey.
Quick question and last question. I was wondering about MyST dataset when you use it. Did you do any pre-processing before use it to train your model?
Yes, I converted them to IPA format. I think by just like some software. You can refer to my paper if you'd like. And I'm filtering out the utterances that's greater than the 15 seconds because I want to improve the performance on the Providence corpus. The Providence corpus, they have very young children, like 1 to 4 years old, and their speech utterances are very short. The average length was just 3 seconds. But for the my sense of the Libre speech, the average utterances sentences can be like 10 seconds long, and the filtering like a longer sentences to just to get the model learn better on the short sentence distributions.
And you used only MyST dataset for child in your work, right?
I
No,
use three data
child.
sets.
No,
The
I
Libre
mean for
speech
child.
for child, there is a my science tutor and Providence corpus. My
Mm.
science tutor that's aged like 8 to 10 years old, and the Providence corpus has the children to aged 1 to 4 years old. And if you want to access these data sets, you can apply to the Childis corpora. It's on the Childis. It's just you have to get a license to use it, but it's free. I think it's free for research.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Right. So yes, well, let's thank again the speakers and the next talk is going to be in September. We'll basically have a short break because of interspeech. I hope you all enjoy the conferences and are not too sick of speech research after that. But we'll come back with more interesting talks in September. So stay tuned. So thanks again, Jialu, and then thanks everybody for attending. So have a great weekend.
Bye bye. Thanks for
Bye.
having me.